So Jordan, I mean, what a great backdrop there. All of us people in the north kind of are jealous of that backdrop for sure. And Eric always just seems to be tucked away somewhere. So
Okay.
he can't like one of these days. I'm going to make you do this from Bourbon Street or something. So,
That would be fun.
yeah,
Yeah.
you might not get much done, but anyway.
Uh,
So so Jordan, you're there at College of Charleston. You're a What year are you? Are you in? Are you a freshman right now or
I
sophomore?
just I just finished my junior year, or
Oh, okay, okay.
my spring semester of my junior year is going on right now.
Gotcha, gotcha. Um, so walk us through your recruiting process and, where were you playing club soccer and how'd you end up where you are?
So I started with a local club in New Orleans called the New Orleans Jesters, and they have a NPSL team there. And they were running this league called, or it was basically just NPSL U19. And so it was, the best players from the surrounding areas competing against other NPSL, essentially second teams. And I did that, and there was a regional scouting event with a company there called SRUSA, and basically I just did that, and I just had good conversation with the coaches and with the agents, and we basically hit it off because our team and this team in Hattiesburg had a pretty intense rivalry, and I performed well in both of the games against that team. And the head coach there, his brother is an agent, and he picked me up and went from there. And we started getting in contact with college coaches, sending emails out. He helped me make a highlight tape, and
Mhm.
we were getting that out. And that's really kind of how I got picked up. That and high school soccer.
Mhm.
I performed well my senior year in high school soccer, won the state championship, state Gatorade Player of the Year, and those accolades helped me stand out from the rest and get picked up.
Right. You're a goalkeeper, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So what year were you in when you did that recruiting event and got connected with agents and all that good
That
stuff?
was that was my senior year, so I was pretty
Okay.
late, like in the
Yeah.
recruiting process. A lot of people start like, really freshman year, sophomore year. I went to one camp my sophomore year at Georgia Southern, but besides that, I didn't really do any camps.
Yeah. Um, so what was that process like from a from the standpoint of like dealing with it and you know did you when did you decide okay, I want to be a college soccer player and be like this is what I need to do to become that? When did that happen and what did you do to make that happen?
That has kind of always been the dream, like since I started playing club soccer, honestly. I did rec, I did, the pickup leagues and all that kind of stuff, but like around 12 years old, I was like, I want to take it to the next step and the next level. And that began with, just training more often and getting really serious about it, taking advantage of every session, um, every goalkeeper session. And then I really started to pick it up like the summer after my sophomore year of high school. And that's when I was training every day over the summer. I trained with the NPSL team as well. And so I got a taste of what it was like to play at a higher level with guys who had played in college or played
Mhm.
professionally. And so I understood the physicality and competitiveness that it took to be able to get to a higher level.
Well, that and like the work ethic and commitment. So when did it dawn on you that like you couldn't just do the club practices and you had to go and do extra work and do
Yeah,
position specific training and all
definitely.
that good stuff.
Probably around uh 14 or 15,
Yeah.
because it was kind of like I knew I had the athletic ability, but I had seen some other goalkeepers around my age as well, and they were making saves that I wasn't making. And so I was like, well, I know I'm just as athletic as they are, and I know I have all the strength and skills that they have. They just trained it more often, and they were accustomed to seeing those things more often. And so they were able to make those saves. And that's when I knew, all right, I need to start seeing those shots more often and get with a coach and just do one-on-one training.
Right. So you basically you like made the transition from only working in your club practice to working with someone individually that could like kind of develop and hone your skills to be
Yeah,
the next level goalkeeper.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it was luckily I was able to find a coach who every session was super intentful, and maybe we weren't doing, the highest amount of reps and the most um, intense workout, but it was always super, thoughtful and planned out and intentful.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Um, so you wrap up high school and you what's it like reporting to campus on the first day? Do you remember that far back?
Oh, yeah. Humbling, very
Yeah,
humbling, because you go from being the big man at your high school, the big guy on campus, to a
yeah.
nobody, and you get a complete like system reset on, you know, who you are, what people think of you, all these things. You get all these thoughts running through your head, and it can be really challenging and really stressful.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe Eric, maybe you guys can talk about the tools that are needed to deal with that situation.
Yeah, I'm curious more, Jordan, of like what what was it like from your experience dealing with not so much the transition to college? I want to ask you about that later, but more of like the recruitment process. And I know a lot of kids have the fear of like making the wrong decision and how do you know where to go to school? So what were some of the things that you dealt with in that process of like later in your senior year and how did you deal with them?
So how did I deal with like the recruitment process and deciding on which school I wanted to choose and that?
Yeah, and like what were some of the struggles, in that process?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things was like personal preferences. It all depends on where you grow up and what climates you're used to and things that feel like home. And I thought South Carolina felt like pretty similar to home. And so I had initially chosen Coastal Carolina and I had attended there for a year. And I think one of the areas that I wish I would have revisited and put more thought into was like, the the big numbers and things. It's not necessarily about the biggest school or, the amount of conference championships they have, but it's more about like where you'll play at the highest level that you can and where you'll develop the most. And I had a couple of schools that were willing to, play me off the bat, and I blew that off, and I just wanted to go to the big school that had the most conference championships. And so I wish I had put more thought into like the school that'll make me feel like family and make me feel like I'm accepted and I can be who I am without having to worry about what other people think of me.
Yeah. Okay, what about in your senior year? Was there any pressure playing, knowing that, maybe scholarships are on the line and college coaches are going to be watching? How did you manage the pressure of that?
I don't think I really put too much concern into that. I think I was more focused on what was in front of me, and that was winning the state championship and being the best player that I could be at that moment. And I think if I did that, I knew opportunities would arise further down the line as long as I stayed focused on what was in front of me. And sure enough, that's what happened. I mean, I'd say towards the second semester of my senior year is when it started to hit like the idea of scholarships and money and playing time. And that's when I really had to focus on the games that were in front of me and the games that I was playing in, and not the stuff that was a year, 6 months down the line. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And do you have any advice for a high school senior who's maybe in that position, or even a junior, somebody who's, looking at colleges and dealing with the pressures and the anxieties that go along with it?
Yeah. I'd say the biggest piece of advice that I can give anyone trying to, go the collegiate route is just be where you are and just focus on the things that are in front of you, and don't worry about things that are out of your control, because if you try to focus on the scholarship money and the playing time, then you're probably not going to play the best with the team that you're on. So focus on those first, and the other opportunities will, you know, come as they do.
Very cool. All right.
Okay.
You got anything, Scott?
No, go ahead. Keep going.
Okay, so let's talk about college. Okay, so making the jump up to college, what were some of the mental struggles or issues that you ran into in that first year?
Off the bat, the biggest one that I noticed was there's not a single player that's like clearly better than everyone else. Everyone is capable of playing and capable of starting. And so I think that's the biggest thing I noticed in the difference between high school and college. I think going in first week of preseason, everyone's, got size and muscle on them, and they're technical as well. And so off the bat, it's just everyone has skill, everyone's able to play. That's the biggest thing I noticed.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And were there any like specific issues or challenges that you dealt with in that freshman year?
Um, for me, probably just adjusting to the physicality and speed of play. I made incredible progress that first semester and that first year, but simply just adjusting, going from like high school soccer, and MPSL soccer is a good level as well, but you just can't really compare it to, a college team until you get there and understand what it's like. And so I'd say adjusting to the physicality of it was definitely my biggest struggle.
Yeah, what about like you mentioned this a little bit earlier, dealing with the slice of humble pie that you have to eat, making that jump up because you're not the big dog on campus anymore. Like you're trying to just get on the field and contribute to the team any way that you can. So what was that like? Because that had to have been a little bit like worldview shattering, because you had been the star on your team your whole life up until that
Yeah.
point. So how was that adjustment, taking on this new role that you have on the team and trying to just own your role and be the star in your role and yeah, accepting that.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, it was super humbling going in and immediately not being the starter and not being the big guy. And so I had to focus on what I could control, which was my work ethic and my attitude towards training and how I approach each session and each, um, recovery, because that's all I could control. I couldn't control, other people's opinions of me, how they play. All I could really focus on was my work ethic and my attitude towards each day. And so that's what I really uh, nailed down that first year, was my mindset and trying to stay as positive as possible, even when I wasn't, reaping the benefits of training.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, and then after that freshman year, you made a change, right?
Yeah.
So what went into that process of deciding to transfer?
Well, I was a pretty late transfer. I'd been told that I didn't have a spot on the team the following fall. And in that day, it kind of feels like your whole world gets flipped upside down, because, you make a lot of friends and you feel like you're settling down in that environment and you're getting used to it. And then it all just gets flipped upside down. And so that's when I really kind of understood that it's it's a pretty cutthroat industry, and you have to just perform every single day. And so I immediately, got in contact with my mom, and we started emailing coaches that day. Reaching out to the coaches that showed interest in me the previous summer,
Yeah.
and reaching out to coaches in that conference and in the surrounding area, because we had played College of Charleston in that spring, and I had gotten a glimpse of it when we had come down here and played them, and I enjoyed it. And so me, my agent, and my mom decided to, reach out to him, and luckily I was able to find a home here.
Were there a lot of like suitors in that process? Was there interest from other schools? Did you have a decision to make, or was Charleston basically the option?
I did have interest from other schools. Elon was one of them. A couple of CAA schools. I think for me the biggest thing was just finding a place where I'll feel like home and that I'll feel like matches my mindset. And, I talked to Keith Wiggins here, who's the head coach, and Rob Seaton, and they were telling me about the pillars here, and their trust, discipline, compete, and resilience. And those are all things that I try to implement into my daily life. And I love that off the bat. And I think after I heard that, I had known this was the place that I needed to come. Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, now let me ask you a little bit about mental training, right? So what what was part of the reason why you sought out mental training in the first place?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest reasons was I had been through a good number of injuries this my sophomore year and my freshman year. And it was really just injury after injury after injury. And I felt like there wasn't really anything that I could do right. Um, and so I felt as though I needed to find someone to help me kind of get out of that rut that I was in. And um, we came across Eric, and it's been incredible. Like, I know there's not only a physical side to the game, there's a mental side as well. And if you can get the upper edge in the mental side, not too many people train that. And so just finding any edge I could get was really what I needed. And luckily, it worked out perfect.
And what kind of stuff have you learned and what has helped you the most?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that has helped me a lot was number one, being mindful. So, being aware of how you're feeling, how your emotions are, making you act, and being able to recognize them and not, let them control you. I think that's the biggest part of mindfulness. And then also being intentful with sessions and games, and having short-term goals, day-to-day goals, and long-term goals. So, year, 2 years, 5, 10 years down the line, where do you want to be? Because a lot of people will, just kind of wander through life not really knowing where to go or have a goal for something. Whereas if you set that goal and have a drive towards something, you feel so much more accomplished and productive. And yeah, so mindfulness and goal setting, I think, have been the biggest things that I've learned.
Very cool. And so if you were talking to a high school junior, senior, or even a college freshman or sophomore, like what would you advise them to focus on in terms of their mindset or in their mental training? Like, would you give them any activities to do on their own, or would you give them something to think about or some perspective in terms of approaching training or competition? What's a piece of, mindset advice that you would give a younger athlete?
I'd say the biggest thing that I'd think of is to be aware of your emotions in games, in training sessions, because it's very easy as a young individual to get frustrated and to get upset with your teammates because they're not, making the pass that you want them to make, that they're not giving you the ball. And so having the ability to recognize your emotions and recognize how you might be playing because of those emotions is probably the biggest piece of advice I'd give a young person, because that'll translate down the line and bleeds into so many other areas of life as well.
Sounds simple, right? But it's hard work.
It's not simple at all.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I think that's a big part of the mental training and the mental journey is it's not really stuff that you can just look up on Google and get the answers to. Like you need to look inward, you need to reflect on yourself and discover these answers, you know, and that's hard to do, especially for young people. But I think if you're willing to do that work, then, you know, you can get a lot of the benefits out of it. And like you said, it doesn't just help you on the pitch playing in your games, but it helps in life too, you know, being able to manage your emotions, manage your thoughts, and control yourself, you know, and direct yourself in a direction that's going to be beneficial and constructive for your life. So, yeah, it's cool to hear that, you know, you've learned those things and are able to apply those things to soccer, to school, to life. Yeah, it's awesome.
Definitely. And just like you said, it doesn't just translate onto the pitch. It allows you to just enjoy life more. It allows you to be more present and be in the moment. And when you're more present, you play better, you feel better, you act more clearly. So yeah.
Hey Jordan, give an example of like, maybe early on or maybe, today, meaning, in modern, in the last 2 days or whatever, like an example where you kind of felt like, okay, my emotions are going to get the better of me, or, they're going to color my judgment or that sort of thing. Maybe give a story of like how you felt it. And now that you've done this mental training, where did it take you and how do you react now, and being mindful.
Yeah. I So when I would train with my goalkeeper coach, like the summer before my senior year of high school, I would maybe not make a save, or I would let a ball go in that I usually save, and I'd go through this thing called second arrowing, and I'd beat myself up about not making that save, even though like the ball in the net is already bad enough. So I would get really frustrated with myself, and then that would uh, bleed over into the next save or the next situation that I'd be in, and it would just carry on and carry on and carry on, and I'd hold on to this frustration throughout the entire session over one small save when I'm making 500 saves a session or something like that. Whereas now I'm much more aware, and I'm able to coexist with my emotions, and sometimes I'll get frustrated if I if I'm like really close to making a really good save and I don't make it. I'll get frustrated for half a second, but then I'll recognize that frustration, and you know, I'll recognize its existence, but then I'll leave it there, and because that save is done and I have another opportunity to make a play and to have a good moment. And so I have improved my turnover rate
Mm,
uh by understanding my emotions and recognizing them.
yeah. So was there a point where you're like, holy smokes, this stuff this guy's talking about, it actually works? Like, did you kind of like have a little smile to yourself when you're like, wait a minute, oh, that's exactly what Eric said, and it's working.
Yep. There have been a couple of moments, because it's not always like so black and white. It kind of ebbs and flows. But there
Hmm.
have definitely been multiple times where it's like I'll be in a situation and I won't get anxious, or I'll recognize the anxiety, and then I'll be like, that's okay, but you're here. And then I'll make a crazy save, and you kind of get those, like, you kind of get that happy warm feeling inside of you. And so I've
Yeah.
definitely had those feelings where it's like, oh wow, okay, recognizing that I have emotions but not letting them affect how I play, like it does something, and it allows you to play more freely, and yeah, I've definitely had like multiple of those moments.
Right. And how is that kind of how have you seen that in the rest of your life? You know, the non-athletics part of it.
Yeah. Uh, it allows you to think clearer about situations. It allows you to take more of an objective viewpoint than a subjective one, and you can, make clearer and better decisions about things and handle situations better. I've also found myself to just be happier now that, kind of I've kind of gone through Eric and I have gone through sessions that are simply about, appreciate appreciating the little things in life. Like this beautiful backdrop behind me. It's gorgeous. Like those are the little things that people forget about. And so outside of soccer, it's allowed me to enjoy life more.
Very cool. Eric, I interrupted you. Go ahead if you have more.
I'm curious, because a lot of people, when they think about mental training, they think about improving performance in games, and getting the best version of themselves out when they compete, getting the version in practice to show up on game day. But how have you noticed, or have you noticed any benefits to your training from, maybe changes in your mindset, changes in your attitude? Like, how's that impacted your training?
It's definitely helped me perform better. You know, Eric and I went through this period of recognizing things that I needed to improve on in training to be able to compete at the highest level. And I've come up with an acronym for it. It's ACC, and it's basically accountability, compete, and communicate. And if I do those three things to the best of my ability, then I'll then be able to play at the best of my ability. And so recognizing things that I need to improve on was probably the biggest area that helped me perform better day in day out.
So ACC, what was the A? I'm sorry. What was that?
Accountability,
Okay.
compete, and communicate.
Right. So walk through what each of those means to you and how you like arrived at those being your acronym.
Yeah. So accountability is essentially, for me personally, it's holding myself to a high standard and not letting, you know, if I feel tired or if I'm feeling sore, not letting that be a reason that my standard drops and holding myself to a standard that I stay at day in, day out. And then for other people, it would be holding them to a standard that they know they should be at and keeping the team standard high. So that's what accountability is for me. And then competing kind of falls into accountability, or it falls into both, because for me, if I want to compete, I need to put my team in the best situation to prevent a shot. And so I'd have to communicate for that to happen and organize the team. And so they can all bleed into each other. But competing is, even if it's just a volley sequence with the goalkeepers to warm up the hands, it's, you're being really intentful and you're making sure, all right, I'm not going to drop any of these balls. And I know I'm not going to drop them, and I'm not concerned about that. And it's staying locked in and, like I said, just competing with every single area, goalkeeper drills, small sided games, full field scrimmages, and then communication is pretty straightforward. Just communicating with my teammates to put them in the best situation to make a block or prevent a shot or score a goal. And so I think those were the three biggest things that I found I needed to work on.
Yeah, what about gratitude? How does gratitude play into your mindset? You mentioned it with the tree behind you, but I think it's easy for college athletes to get into like an ungrateful attitude of like, why do I have to do all this crap? It's cold outside. I don't want to train. It's early. I've got to do schoolwork. Maybe my friends who aren't athletes, they don't have to do all this extra stuff. Why do I have to do this? And it's easy to kind of slip into a woe is me mindset. So how does gratitude play into maybe your happiness as a college athlete?
It's allowed me to be so much more grateful and enjoy things better. I think, like you said, a lot of college athletes and a lot of athletes in general kind of just get lost in this idea that, um, or we take a lot of things for granted, like being able to go out and having a full session planned for us and not having to put any thought in advance of what we're doing. I think that's something a lot of people take it for granted. And, having a locker room, having a locker, being able to wake up and go play soccer with your friends. A lot of athletes take that for granted. And I've tried to make that a point when I wake up every day is, being thankful for the things that I've been given and the places I've been able to go with soccer. And that's what's really allowed me to enjoy this sport and play at the highest level I can.
Very cool.
So do you journal at all?
I do. I actually have my journal right here.
Cool. Yeah. Is that something that you and Eric have worked on, or when you mention gratitude, I think that that's like Eric. I think you and I have talked about it, like addressing what you're grateful for is like there's science behind it. It's really good for you, like from a mindfulness state. So, you know, whatever you're willing to share, like how do you structure your what you're journaling about, or is it just kind of a free flow thing?
For me, I'd say it's a pretty like free flow thing. Some days it'll simply be like I feel the need to talk to someone, but I don't want to talk to anyone, and so I'll write it down in my journal. And the
Hmm.
process of actually getting it down on paper allows me to think about it because my mind goes so much faster than my hand can write. And so
Hmm.
I have to sit with that moment and sit with that emotion or feeling and think through it and think about it and how it makes me feel and how I can, you know, change it for the better. And so most
Right.
days it'll kind of be free flowing, but whenever I meet with Eric, we'll pin something down and he'll give me some homework for the week and I'll go about that and I'll jot down some notes on how that makes me feel and how it's improved my week or how maybe it's um or how it hasn't affected me and hasn't helped me. And I don't think there's been a single thing that hasn't helped me though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, that's all I got.
Okay. So Jordan, who's your favorite goalkeeper, man?
Cool.
Oh, that's a
Who
tough
like
question.
actually let me ask it in a different way. Who have you kind of modeled yourself after? Who you watch and you're like, that's who I want to play like.
So I kind of take bits and pieces, but like
Mhm.
if I'm watching a goalkeeper, I really enjoyed watching David De Gea play. And
Yeah.
he's not on a team right now, but when he was at Manchester United, him and Kasper Schmeichel, because Kasper Schmeichel is just crazy. Like he's a
Yeah.
nut job, but he
Yeah.
competed every day and he communicated.
Mhm.
So him and David De Gea probably.
Right. So, which brings me to another question, and I'm hoping you can help me out here because goalkeepers, you guys are, by reputation, you're a little different than other people, um, but like Pickford, like what is he yelling about? What is he like all this stuff that he's like got going on, and screaming at everyone, and all the gestures and everything. Like, what's going on? Like, help me understand what he's doing.
So I've talked with, the GK Union about that, the group of
Right, right.
goalkeepers at on our team, and we've kind of come to the conclusion that most of it's for like theatrics or some of it's for
Mhm.
theatrics, but he's
Right.
also like he's very passionate, but then
Hmm.
you just blend the passion with the theatrics and you kind of get this, exuberant, flamboyant
Right.
reactions.
Right. So Eric, he's like the number one. Well, Ramsdale is between him and Ramsdale, like the number one goalkeepers for England. He
Okay.
plays for Everton, and it, I think that like there's that fine line. Getting back to kind of what we've been talking about, like I, the way he looks sometimes, he's blaming his teammates, like he's kind of scolding them and being condescending and like I just wonder what it's like to play with a goalkeeper who or another player in general, like who's always like kind of busting your balls, and like making you feel like this on my shoulders rather than taking the ownership that they should take. Because I mean, you talk about like you're through your communication, you're trying to position players to be their best, to be in the best spot, to help out the team and compete the best. So, like, how does a character like that with a personality like that, figure in? How would they figure into your pillars?
Um, it's interesting. Kind of how Pickford is now. It'd be fascinating to like, have him mic'd up or something to see how he communicates with different players because some players they could have a full team that's like, able to just take it on the chin and just,
Right.
you can scream at them, you can curse at them and they can filter that out and understand what you're saying. And then you have some players who you need to be a bit more you need to have a bit more proactive and, positive communication with them. And I think that's something I learned coming into college is you have guys with big personalities. That's how they got to this level. They have
Right.
confidence, they have big personalities, and they believe in themselves and you have to learn how to manage those personalities as well as a goalkeeper. So maybe I have one guy who's kind of hot-headed and I can't really yell at him because if I yell at him he's going to yell right back at me and he's not going to
Right.
take anything I just said. Whereas there's a center back that I can, scream my head off at and he'll be like, "Yeah, sound got it." And so
Right.
it's all about managing just personalities. And so they might just have a group of, sound guys that can take his
Right.
berating every game.
Right. But I mean, you make a good point because you have to, as goalkeeper is a natural leader, right? And just by virtue of where you are on the field,
Yeah,
and the responsibility the burden of responsibility that you have. So, like part of leadership is understanding, the 10 guys in front of you that you have to understand. Like you just said, like I know I can yell at that guy, but this guy I kind of have to have some kid gloves with and make sure that I'm not saying something that takes him out of his game. Right.
exactly.
And so, like, how have you figured that out? What's been your process to come to the understanding of, you know, who guys are, like getting to
Uh,
know them and handling that?
yeah, definitely trial and error.
Okay.
Like it's basically you got to get thrown in the fire to be able to learn how to handle it. And there have been several times where it's we'll be playing a scrimmage and you know I'll have a lapse in concentration or something and I'll yell at the one guy I'm not supposed to yell at and then he'll yell back at me and it's like right, forgot about that, okay, and
Right.
needs to be a bit more productive with him next time. And so
Mhm.
it's really just trial and error, just getting thrown in net and learning how to communicate with each person. And you can probably
Right.
also notice it in their small sided games, when they try to do possession games, who gets frustrated the quickest and, keeping notes of that and then going into, the scrimmages and applying that to the communication.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like with your family, like, how to handle your siblings or your mom or whoever. So it's, it's definitely, it's an art, right? And so maybe talk some a little bit. Maybe you can connect what you've learned from Eric and you know how it's helped you deal with people just in general. Yeah. I mean, so how do you think that what Eric, you and Eric have worked on, or, how has it helped you deal with different personalities and be a better leader and, um, you know, in a way help, well, not in a way, but help your teammates, be better? Mhm. Right. Well, in essence, you're building trust, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Scott, I think a big part of this is, like you said, trust and mutual respect, right? Like with Pickford, and I don't know anything about Pickford, but I imagine that him and his teammates have a certain amount of trust and mutual respect, and that's what allows him to talk to them the way that he does. If he didn't have that, he probably wouldn't get the response from them, that he needs in that moment. So I
Right.
think that's a big part of, team dynamics in general and team cohesion. And if you want to develop that trust and mutual respect, you need to invest time to create genuine, authentic relationships. And that happens on the field and it also happens off the field, right? With your teammates and with your coaches. So I think investing time into that and um, like learning how each of your different teammates reacts to different situations, learning how they tick, learning their motivators and a little bit of their psychology helps a lot with creating those real relationships. And then all that stuff transfers over onto the field. And you hear this stuff from athletes all the time, athletes who are on successful teams, they say the best teams I was ever on were the ones that we all got along. We were all friends off the field. We all really liked each other and had that real genuine connection, real respect, real trust. And that helps you to go to battle with your friends. And when it gets a little heated, you can get heated and know like this guy doesn't hate me. Like we're friends. We just hung out last weekend, you know what I mean? Like we stayed up talking all night. Like we're good. He just wants me to change the way I'm playing. I could do
Right.
that. But when you don't know that this guy has genuine respect for you and love for you, then sometimes you take that negative feedback that you get in a game and you start getting defensive yourself. So I think that's a big part of it is investing the time on many levels to create, genuine, authentic relationships and connections with your teammates and coaches.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, and you don't have to wait until you're in college to figure that out, right? I mean, if you're thinking of this stuff and working on this stuff as a high school kid or even earlier, but and you develop it as one of your characteristics, college coaches are going to see the way you interact with your teammates, and they are going to see that you can fit into their culture and that you can help make them better. So it's not just your technical ability, right? It's the way you interact with your teammates and your coach. Or I mean, there's a story that one of the coaches have had on the William Mary coach. He was talking about how a kid threw his bag. His mom asked him after a loss, like, how are you okay or whatever. And he just shut up, mom, and threw his bag at her. And he's like, I don't want that kid on my team. It's that would be a terrible thing for our culture. So um, it's kind of growing into being a good teammate and that sort of thing. Um, yeah. So yeah, yeah, go ahead. Yeah. No, no, no. Right. Because then they know they can trust you too. So yeah. What else? Have you shared some of the stuff you learned with your teammates? Hmm. 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 Cool. Um, how you guys how you guys gonna look next fall? Yeah. Good. Hmm. Cool. I'll definitely find you at that. I think you guys came to Williamsburg this year, right? So it'll be down there. Yeah. All right. I'll be in Charleston. I'm gonna hit you up for a good place to eat next fall. So, um, anything else, guys? That was fantastic. I really that was
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks,
All
Sean.
right. Yeah. Hold on one sec. I'm gonna hit stop.